Before we start, if you have a cell phone on, if you could please turn it off so it doesn't disrupt a lot of the cameras in here this evening, would be wonderful. And then I'm going to invite everyone to join me in the pledge first, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Wallace or Mr. Coy, who's ever going to do roll call?
I will. Filkins.
Here.
Champlin.
Here.
Van Lente. Smith.
Here.
Peterson. Schichtel.
Here.
Gregg.
Here.
Fent.
Here.
Hutphin.
Here. Thank you. Before we get started, I just need an approval here of our special meeting that was held February 3rd, 2016. For the record, we did not have a meeting on January 25th, which was our scheduled meeting. So that's why the difference in the dates. That is now noted in the new meeting minutes, that change. So I'd entertain if everybody else had a chance to read that. Motion by Ms. Filkin, seconded. Support. Mr. Gregg.
Gregg.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Schichtel.
Yes.
Champlin.
Yes.
Van Lente. Fent.
Yes.
Peterson. Filkins.
Yes.
Hutphin.
Yes. Thank you. Next, before we get rolling, just an approval here of this evening's agenda. Again, this is for February 22nd, 2016.
I move that we approve the agenda for tonight.
Mr. Schichtel.
Second.
Mr. Smith.
Fent.
Yes.
Filkins.
Yes.
Champlin.
Yes.
Schichtel.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Peterson. Van Lente. Gregg.
Yes.
Hutphin.
Yes. Thank you. There being no old business this evening, we'll move right into new business, which, wow, why everyone's here. So before we get going, we will be having a public hearing here this evening to consider a request from Terry D. LLC for the rezoning of Cadillac Junction / Terry D. project to a mixed-use PUD district and for a sketch plan submittal. Having read that, Mr. Wallace, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide you a little bit of background. Many of you have been following this project, so it might be a little redundant, but I'll just quickly cover it. As you know, we recently completed the city's master plan, and when we completed the city's master plan, we included a designation in the future land use plan that this property would be used for a mixed-use planned unit development. In that designation, we identified the nature of the uses that would be appropriate to be applied for and submitted for. I've included a staff report on your table which kind of includes the pertinent parts of the master plan dealing with the land uses so that you can compare what's being applied for with the uses as identified in the master plan. As the mixed-use planned unit development ordinance was written, because it was mixed-use and because it was such a diverse site that could handle so many different uses, the mixed-use ordinance provided for practically all the other uses in our zoning districts with the exception of our industrial uses, and it also excluded adult-oriented uses. So industrial uses were out, adult uses were out, but practically everything else that's provided for in our current ordinance would be up for consideration. I personally have reviewed the plans and prepared to comment on some of the basic parameters for the sketch plan. But before I do that, I just want to indicate that the development team for Terry D. has been meeting with various department heads over several meetings. Just recently we had two collective meetings where all the department heads sat in the room with the developer at the same time. We've had a chance to review the plans, and I will indicate that the development team has been very receptive to the changes that we thought were important to be made to the plan on the city's behalf, and I'll go over those in just a minute. But as of right now, all the city's department heads are satisfied that what's being submitted with the sketch plan is appropriate for meeting city standards, and they're satisfied with the design that's being submitted. With respect to, I personally reviewed the buffers and the building setback information per the ordinance, and all the buffers that have been required of the ordinance are in place. The building setbacks as well are in place. The sign code per the ordinance, you can either utilize the city sign code or you can move in a different direction on that. The sign that they have submitted as part of the project actually is slightly less than what's permitted by our existing sign code. So barring a decision to go in another direction, it would meet current requirements. There are two areas that we're also going to be leaning a little bit on MDOT in addition to our own city department heads. That would be with respect to any requirements of the streets or at the entry or the entry design itself. We're going to be asked that when they come up with the final design per MDOT recommendation or requirement, that be supplied as part of our plan approval. Also, although we've had the city's engineer review the drainage plan, I believe the MDOT is also reviewing the drainage plan, and while our own engineer is satisfied, we would also be looking for concurrence from MDOT that the drainage plan that they proposed is in keeping with their requirements. Through the meetings covering some of the major changes that were made to the plan were the widening of the street right-of-way for the private roads. The road that was proposed through the residential area was, I think, down around 24, 25 feet. Our fire department reviewed and discovered that really should be up at 28 feet to allow the passage of fire vehicles, and they were happy to make that change, and now that 28 feet width is through the entire portion of the private street circulation through the private development. Also, they agreed to put in an additional emergency access point near one of the large big box development sites, just to ensure that the senior independent living units would be easily accessible in the chance of a road blockage further up the road. And so that worked out really well as well. The parking requirements are difficult to determine until we get to final site plan review, but that said, generically you can review the parking requirements. I have done that. I've reviewed what's been proposed and compared it against both the ITE journal, which is the Institute of Traffic Engineers. I've also compared it against other zoning ordinances, and I also did my own investigation up on Boone Road to see what the parking occupation rates were at existing big box development. And I feel confident that the parking spaces as proposed generically, until we see specific uses, are appropriate for the sites that they've designated. I would reserve for the right to the city upon the final use submitted, depending on what they include as part of their development package, the ability to go in and make some final adjustments to that parking number if a different scenario unfolds through the final development plan. We also in the interest of trying to make the development more walkable, we asked the developer if they would consider 2 additional internal pathways to make better connections between the residential portions of the development and the commercial portions, so that people even as little as 100 yards away wouldn't be getting in their car necessarily to walk over, or to ride over to the restaurant, that they could easily walk down a sidewalk and either buy something at a convenience store or attend one of the restaurants for dinner. So they've made those changes and have included the additional walkways in their plan. We discussed a third walkway out on M55, which they're agreeable to do, and we concurred that probably at the outset is not the right time, but we would put into the development agreement at some time in the future when we feel satisfied we have a safe connection route, that at such time that we would be able to have the developer add that improvement on the front of the project. And final things, the size, of course, is only by ordinance required to be 20 acres. This site is 141 plus acres, so size-wise it meets the requirements of the ordinance. The drainage, I think I mentioned before, was approved by the city engineer, but would require MDOT approval. We have asked, and the developer has asked, that the MDOT representative be here tonight. I believe they're probably in attendance, but that would be a final requirement on the drainage piece. And with respect to the retention ponds, the commercial retention ponds, there's 4 altogether, 2 in the commercial piece. The city would maintain the viability of the working drainage system from the 2 commercial piece detention ponds, and the developer would be maintaining the 2 detention ponds that were in the residential and senior assisted living facility portions of the project. So that's how that worked out. In any kind of approval consideration tonight, I am suggesting at the end of my staff report that any recommended approval to City Council would include a final MDOT approval of the street designs at the entry, and also for drainage concurrence with our city engineer. The provision of the sidewalk and trail inclusion in the development agreement as it relates to M55. The ability that the developer would provide for the needed right-of-way for a future extension of Terry D. Boulevard to the south line in the event of future developments that may occur in that area. The city would reserve the right to review final uses upon final site plan approval for the final parking space determination, and that there would be a successful conclusion and agreement on the development agreement between the city and the developer with respect to all the different legal things that need to be addressed in the development agreement, including those that might relate to the design of the project. With that, and I think you can read more in my staff report, but I'm recommending that the Planning Commission recommend approval to the City Council for the rezoning and for the sketch plan approval. I believe that it does meet the master plan intent. I believe the developers worked in good faith with all the city's department heads and myself to address concerns that we've raised in the last month or two, and feel that the plan is in a good position for action. One final thing they also did was to designate some woodlot preservation areas that would be preserved so that there would be no clear cutting in those areas, so that the woodlot cover that provides some of the buffer for the adjoining residents would be preserved into the future. So with all that they've done, I think we're in a good place to move forward with that. I'll turn it over to Ann Searink from Foster Swift, and she can cover some of the remaining legal considerations and process issues as the plan moves forward.
Thank you. I just wanted to spend a couple minutes tonight talking about the role of the Planning Commission here tonight, and then giving the Planning Commission and the public a little bit of information as to where it goes from here. So the purpose of tonight's meeting obviously is to hold a public hearing on this application. It's regarding both a MPUD rezoning and a sketch plan review. So the role of the Planning Commission is to review the sketch plan and the application that's before you tonight, and as submitted by the applicant. The ordinance provides that the application for rezoning the sketch plan will be considered concurrently, so you, as the Planning Commission, can make one motion that incorporates both those issues here tonight. Following the public hearing, the Planning Commission should do one of three things. One, approve. Two, deny, or approve with conditions. And Mr. Wallace has already mentioned some of the conditions that you may consider that's in his final report. But I do want to mention that the basis for any condition must meet the requirements of Section 46-657 sub E of the zoning ordinance, the part on the MPUD that has the basis for any conditions to that. So what will happen then is the recommendation will be made here, and then that recommendation will be submitted to the City Council. The City Council will also hold a public hearing, much like the one done tonight, noticed and everything, and then they will have the same options as the Planning Commission. They'll make a final determination, either to grant, deny, or to grant with certain conditions on that. One thing I do want to make clear too is that we're talking here tonight about the rezoning and the sketch plan part. And if the sketch plan is approved by the City Council, they have to prepare a final site plan. That final site plan will come back again before the Planning Commission. So you'll have a chance again to make recommendations to the City Council on that final site plan. Those recommendations are then transmitted to the City Council, and the City Council will again make a final determination on that site plan. So I wanted to give you a little overview of the process, your obligations and roles tonight, and then what will happen subsequent to this, if you have any questions.
Will the second submittal be public hearing or no?
I don't believe there's a requirement for the final site plan to have another public hearing. I want to be clear that there will be another public hearing before City Council on the sketch plan.
Got it. Okay. Anyone have questions for Ann? Yeah? No?
Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, just because there isn't another requirement for a public hearing certainly doesn't mean that the public, the public can still be invited to attend. It's a public meeting and in the same public forum. So.
And there will be an opportunity for public comment at like every other meeting as well. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Where are we at now?
Yeah, at this point in time, to make sure that, some questions that might come up during a public hearing might get answered before then, I've asked that the developer make a short 10-minute presentation to demonstrate some of the graphic depictions of the project. It might help answer the nature of the development, how it would look, how it would be buffered, and so forth, and some of their main points in their design of the project. And that'll give the public a better idea of the project so they can better direct their comments during the public hearing. Jim?
Hi. You would just state your name for us and...
Sure. I'm Jim Vanderlaan from Terry D. LLC. Very happy to be here this evening. Along with me, I have Randy Cracker from Varnum Law, Rob Behrens from XL Engineering, Jim Morgan, RJM Design, and my wife Terry. We're just very happy to review our PUD site plan with you. John Wallace has done a good job of going over the overview, and I apologize if some of my comments are a little redundant. I'd like to give you a brief overview of the total development. The residential community entrance of Carroll Lane has been attractively and safely changed. The steepness of the hill has been extended and reduced. A planned 120-unit luxury market rate, not subsidized apartments with washer, dryer, dishwasher, range, refrigerator. Included with each unit is a garage with an automatic door opener. A wooded walking jogging trail is conveniently accessed and connected to shopping. The east side is a wooded buffer area. A 50-foot landscape buffer is required by the city PUD ordinance, but we are offering a 100-foot landscape buffer. We anticipate apartments to be developed in the near future. Senior living centers, both independent and assisted. As the abilities warrant, residents can move from the independent living units to very comfortable assisted living units without leaving familiar surroundings. We have spoken to one of the best senior living center operators in the state who has shown interest. With the 100-foot easterly buffer, no commercial building is within a quarter of a mile of residential homes to the east, separated by heavily wooded land, which, as much as possible, will remain. The whole residential area is a buffer on the east side and provides a very nice transitional land use. The commercial area, architectural controls and submission of individual site plans and plan approval by you, the planning board, but also must be approved by Terry D., the developer. We have many levels of control to maintain the quality of improvements. We have a declaration of restrictions that all occupants will agree to, our own layer of restrictions on top of the PUD ordinance. Upon approval, we expect a significant amount of interest in the commercial area. A deed restriction contained in our purchase agreement with J&H Oil states, seller covenants that so long as buyer is operating a gasoline fueling station on the property, seller shall not permit any portion of the development located within 500 feet of State Highway M55 and owned by the seller as of the effective date to be used for the retail sale of gasoline or diesel fuel. Only one gas station on M55. The second gas filling area on the plan is for a box store location such as required by Sam's Club or Costco. The overall site plan is 141.4 acres. The current site plan will meet or exceed the open area requirements of the city PUD ordinance regulation. With regards to traffic, the main entrance at M55 per MDOT's advisement is no longer planned as a divided boulevard road. We have proposed extending the center lane on M55 to the east past Carroll Lane, and a proposed deceleration lane west of the main entrance will be provided. A traffic light may also be necessary, but we will do whatever is required by MDOT. These requirements will be phased in as the development grows. Rick Libtech from MDOT is here tonight, and he can explain the process and answer any questions that you have. Infrastructure, the sewer, water, and utilities, public streets. Terry D. is bearing all the cost of providing water, sewer, and public roads. We will build to city specs and turn the ownership over to the city. Terry D. Boulevard has an 86-foot wide right-of-way to accommodate as many traffic lanes as needed. The city has approved the sewer and water plans, which are now at the DEQ for their approval. Stormwater, we are working with MDOT. On-site retention and infiltration is being designed with overflow for large storms following MDOT criteria for what can leave the property. Our engineer Rob Behrens and Rick Liptek can answer any questions that you have with regards to that. Safety, we have met with the City of Cadillac Fire Department, Chief Anthony Wolf and Captain Fred Osborne, along with Police Chief Todd Gulnick, and implemented their recommendations. Emergency vehicle entrances and turnarounds, 28-foot width on the private residential street. The connectivity, sidewalks, trails, and roads are all part of the plan. Lighting. We must provide a balance between safety and promoting dark sky or sky glow. A proposed site lighting will be sufficient to maintain safe nighttime levels of illumination for security of people and property. Proposed site lighting will be designed to minimize intrusive levels, protect the privacy of adjacent property owners, minimize energy consumption, and control dark sky. Fixtures will be fully shielded and directed downward to control off-site glare. Signage. One 36-foot high project entrance sign is proposed for the main entrance to identify the overall development and the major tenants of the commercial community. This sign will be placed perpendicular to M55, setback from the public right-of-way per zoning ordinances. The city ordinance allows for a 40-foot high sign, and various Herring Township signs are taller than our proposed sign. Directional or wayfinding signs are proposed along Terry D. Boulevard to direct and inform movement of vehicles and pedestrians within the community. Additional freestanding signs, monument signs, wall signs will be proposed during final site plan review as individual projects move forward. The city PUD ordinance regulation requires 35% open space. Our plan meets or exceeds this open space regulation. Notice the landscape green spaces within the parking lots. On the west side, MDOT's wooded land buffers, US 131. On M55 frontage, Terry D. will install a landscape berm buffer with shrubs and ground cover. We will also beautifully landscape around our entrance. Can we see what it looks like from the road, Jim? That would be the view from a car of the road. Right there. Cadillac Junction is self-contained, professionally landscaped with a beautiful main entrance, providing new amenities and services to our area and community. This development will be a destination of the region. It is estimated this regional development will bring 850 to 1,000 new jobs. This development costs the taxpayers nothing. Terry D. is bearing all the infrastructure cost, resulting in millions of dollars in new taxable value and hundreds of thousands of new tax dollars. We ask that you approve our site plan so that we can begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. At this time, we will go ahead here and open the public hearing. If you would, try and keep your comments to a minimum. There's a lot of folks, so everybody can get a chance to speak, please. At the podium, we have paper and pen. You need not verbally say your address, but if you would please print your name and address on that paper, that's great. And at this time, again, we will open public hearing for anyone wishing to speak on this proposed sketch plan and rezoning. Hi.
Mayor?
Please.
I've lived just a little more over, Jim Szabo.
Thanks, Jim.
I live just a little over a quarter mile away from this proposed development, and I was just thinking about all the people who live close to that, probably within the mile area. If we could find 500 people that have lived there for 30 years, you've got 15,000 years that people have lived there and accepted a certain kind of lifestyle. That's about to change if this goes through. 141 acres. That used to be great deer terrain. People used to hunt back there. I know things change, but I find it hard to believe that what we're seeing right now is an improvement, and I also find it hard to believe that we're going to see a true improvement. Mr. Vanderlaan, I know that you approached light pollution, but are you willing to go out there with a light meter and tell me that I'm going to be able to see the stars? I have some serious doubts about that. Walmart Myers is 2 miles off. We can look that way and the sky glows. You're going to put it a quarter mile off? We'll never have a chance to see them. I chose to live where I am now, and we've been in the current house for 26 years. It's going to affect 15,000 plus years that people have lived there. I would also like the City Council to think about downtown businesses. Cadillac residents do use them now. They are the lifeline of this community. You put a development like that out, who's going to want to shop downtown? And as we're talking about businesses, I am a former educator that would go knocking on many doors of businesses, advertising and programs. $10,000 to $12,000 of advertising for one program. I've got to tell you, when I've gone to the North End, to Myers, Office Max, Walmart, all these stores, I have knocked on their doors 20 times a piece. I haven't gotten a nickel from them. And if you think we're going to be able to knock on the doors of a new facility, I disagree with you. Go to these big dollar stores and see how you do. And I'm telling you, I know how public education is funded when you're trying to do extra things with kids. I don't believe the support will be there. Fine, they're going to come up with tax money, but once again, you're looking at lifestyle. I should probably say this too, when you're dealing with these companies, you can contact the corporate office, which a lot of times is what they tell you to do. Then you have to submit applications. Those applications are usually considered, and they go to much larger communities. I can go downtown. If I need $100 to do something, I can go downtown and raise that in 2 minutes. I can think of a number of stores that would know me by name and say, Jim, I like the idea, let's go. I don't think we're going to have that kind of support. The people who developed Cadillac had zoned that land for residences. And when the state of Michigan put 131 in, did you notice that they didn't allow construction in there? Anything with tied in with new businesses was supposed to go to the North End. Why? The people and the residents that lived in that area wanted to live there peacefully without all kinds of traffic and messes. I haven't heard anybody address new crime. I guarantee you put a bunch of businesses in there and crime's going to increase in that area. Even though towns like McBain get break-ins. It's going to happen here. And I'll tell you what, 131 is a real fast shot either north or south to get out of town. I'm usually around my house quite a bit. And I know you guys have heard from the developers. I understand that. John, you didn't come knocking on my door asking me for my opinion. You didn't come knocking on my door to ask the opinions of all my neighbors. Would you want this facility next to your house? I'd like an answer.
Sir, some decorum would be nice at this point.
Well, listen, I'm being as decent as I can right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have an answer?
The purpose of public comment is for you to give your comments to the Planning Commission, and so that's the role of this right now.
It's also a form of snowballing the community, which I don't care for. He didn't give us an answer. Nobody came by my house. If we have other residents back here, I want to know how many people knocked in your doors to tell you about the exciting adventure they're putting out there. And I would also say this to all of the people in front of me. Would you want this development next to your house? I know other people want to speak, but I can tell you a lot of people don't want your development. I'm saying that as kind as I possibly can. We just talked about jobs. We heard him talk about jobs. Minimum wage jobs. I think if you were talking about bringing in $20, $25, $30 an hour jobs for 80% of the people working there, I might have a little different attitude. But we've heard about people coming in and getting all these jobs. Anybody in here who is close to business people downtown, I think you're going to really hurt the community by allowing that to come in. I don't think it's a development that's going to help our community at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, anybody else like to have a shot at this? Hi, George.
John? You really have to stop meeting like this, John. I should get a rubber stamp.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got prepared remarks. If it's all right, I'd like to pass them out.
Sure. Thank you. Sorry. I know. I grabbed that. I caught that. And more for the audience, tell them who you are.
Yeah, I'm George Giftis. I live in the...
You don't have to tell where you live, that's okay.
Okay, that's good enough, okay. All right. Good evening, folks. Thank you for allowing us to speak out on the site plan for Cadillac Junction submitted by Terry D. LLC. As John Wallace pointed out in previous meetings, the mixed-use PUD ordinance was developed as a generic ordinance, not specifically designed for the Terry D. property. As such, it's a blueprint designed to be altered by the City Planning Commission to fit each specific use. You folks have told us in the past that part of your mission was to protect the harmoniousness of the area and the residents who reside there. As we look at the Terry D. property, there is no way it cannot be viewed as spot zoning. I mean, it's spot zoning, something that was abhorred in the past, but times have changed, and unfortunately this is now. You have heard many general comments, you will hear many general comments this evening as to what's wrong with this site plan, but I'd like to get specific with a number of requests for changes. These suggestions will anger the developer, but that's to be expected, as I've been through this process before with them. To begin, let's look at the setbacks. There are several different setbacks mentioned in the ordinance depending on the circumstances involved. The setback on the site plan for the north boundary is set at 40 feet. That's the current site plan you have. And unfortunately, these drawings don't really show the homes that are right across the street. It's hard to see from here. I don't consider 40 feet acceptable. As I stood on the rear deck of the house directly across from the proposed gas station. Now, I'd like you folks to just imagine this, envision this in your minds. Your yard, the width of a state highway added to that, add 40 feet, and picture yourself on your deck on a nice warm summer evening, which we haven't had many of lately, watching cars fuel up less than a football field away from you. Picture the light pollution coming in your bedroom window. This is not acceptable, and I'm requesting a 100-foot setback. This is allowable by your ordinance, for this property has residences. Actually has residences on 3 sides, 3 contiguous boundaries. The east would point east, the north with Woodland Estates, and the west with those homes the city annexed
in order to have a contiguous boundary, and that's the least contiguous of them all. You see, the city did not allow a 4-lane expressway to prevent a contiguous boundary, so I maintain that a much smaller state highway also does not prevent a contiguous boundary. According to your ordinance, when the mixed-use PUD has a contiguous residential development on its boundary, the minimum allowable setback is 70 feet. But you also have the ability to add up to 50% to that figure. That would be 105, but I'll settle for 100. I request that you ban all pylon signs because of the proximity of residences. Pylon signs are those signs which are set up on poles called pylons and are taller than anything else in the area. I would like to see a signage restriction which limits all signs to the heights of the buildings for which they advertise. In addition, I would love to see the city of Cadillac adopt a dark sky ordinance such as the one Traverse City has. This would force businesses to turn off their signs at 11 p.m. if the businesses were not open, and allow them to turn on after 7 a.m. This is only if the business is not open at night and does not present a hardship to any business. Also, don't fall for the statement as presented to the City Council that all the lights would be downward-facing LED lights, so LED light pollution would not be a problem. The presenter used this argument when I objected to the light pollution they would create. His response was that LED lights light the area evenly, not producing any hot spots, and the hot spots create the reflections off the pavement, bouncing that light into the sky. That's pure hogwash. It's the total lumens hitting the reflective surfaces which causes the bounce back into the night sky. And no matter how you do the light downward facing, you're going to have bounce back up into the sky. You can't help it. If you folks were at the virtual presentation of the Cadillac Junction development to the City Council, you would have seen a virtual view of the development from the houses across the street. Yep, you couldn't see anything. Problem is, as the presenter told me later out in the hall, they added a bunch of virtual trees which don't exist on either side of the street, and any plantings would take 20 to 30 years to even approach the size of the trees shown. While there were mature trees on the property, the developer removed them when the land was flattened. They really didn't have to do this. Also, the topography of the land prior to being bulldozed was about a 6-foot elevation. I'm requesting that in the 100-foot setback from M55, you also mandate a 6-foot berm with evergreen plantings to create a visual barrier. The number of trees necessary would have to be determined by a nursery, but that area should also include a programmed underground irrigation system to guarantee the survival of those trees. You've seen several areas of the 131 interchanges where the plantings did not survive due to the lack of irrigation. Again, I remind you that this is a commercial development plunked down in the middle of a residential area and different from the site the generic ordinance was designed for. If you travel out north on 131 at night, as you pass the 115 interchange, look toward Mackinac Trail and look at the light pollution coming from that one gas station. There's more light there coming up into the sky than there is from the whole city of Cadillac. Do you really want to put something like that in a residential area? Further, do you really think it's necessary to have 2 of them? The solution I suggest is to limit the number of service stations to 1. If someone really needs gas or a coffee, 1 gas station is all they need. That primary service station is located at the northwest corner currently, where it greatly impacts the lives of the long-term residents of Woodland Estates. The solution to this is simple. Move the service station to the southwest corner of the development, still visible but much less obtrusive. I'm asking you to deny the site plan as presented and request a revised site plan from Terry D. with the changes I requested above. You have the ability to do this, and these changes would go a long way to protecting that area. Only time will tell if this area even develops close to what the site plan shows, but the changes I've requested will go further toward making this a high-end development, which does not negatively impact the area. And that's what the developers told us all along they were trying to do. So you're going to hear, or you've heard, passionate remarks. Yeah, we've lived there at 15,000 years, I guess I heard. That's a lot of years. We've been there I think maybe 40 years. Yeah, we moved out there because we wanted quiet. We moved out there because we wanted to live out in the country. And unfortunately, the country is leaving us. But you folks could help us a lot just by mandating the requests that I've made. And I thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, folks.
Hi.
Hello. My name is Randy Harris, and I also am a resident of Woodland Estates, which is not appearing on any of our fine drawings this night. Let me begin by saying that I have served on a city council and on a charter commission, though in a different municipality where I previously lived, and having done so, I'm quite confident that you might agree with me tonight as members of the Planning Commission that you are not serving for power or prestige or glamour. My guess is that you're doing it out of a civic-minded sense of duty to encourage and to influence with wisdom growth in the Cadillac area. So this confidence in your civic-minded intentions as a planning commission gives me some hope that the current site plan offered by the developer will not be found suitable or acceptable. The site plan is not compatible or harmonious with the residential areas near the developer's property. Perhaps if the residential parts of the development were directly across M55 from Woodland Estates, there might be some slight hope of harmony and compatibility. As is, the site plan is lacking, and for valid reasons mentioned by my neighbors at many past hearings over the years, and again tonight. What the site plan shows is an inadequate setback, which George just alluded to, that will place commercial businesses, and most notably a gas station, directly in the sight of nearby residences. The inevitable noise pollution and light pollution and litter, which we've talked about many times before, that will surely accompany such a development could be somewhat minimized by a much larger setback with a substantial berm and mature landscaping. And even then, more changes to the site plan would be necessary. I would suggest that the Planning Commission members walk the nearby residential area and look toward the development site. Don't drive past in your cars. Get out of your cars, come on into our neighborhood, stand there, and imagine how any development would look and sound and smell from the vantage point of our front yards and backyards. And imagine what it would look like if a development there actually was harmonious, really was compatible, actually was, from our vantage point, attractive with the neighborhood in which you stood. Can such a commercial development exist? Not with that site plan. In a recent essay, Princeton sociologist and public affairs professor Paul Starr concluded this: democracy depends on and is defined by the ability of political power to control strictly economic forces. Let me say that again. Democracy depends on and is defined by the ability of political power to control strictly economic forces. The Planning Commission can exert its political power and make a civic-minded decision that is about much more than possible big box stores and yet another gas station convenience store. I encourage you to
respect the voices of residential property owners, and not to approve the plans presented tonight by the developer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris.
My name is Tony Colasaco. I live in the house that would be most proximate to this development, immediately across the street from the proposed main entrance. Let me just say that I support the comments of the previous presenters, commenters, so I won't repeat them. There is one issue I had some concerns about that I wanted to raise, and that has to do with traffic flow and traffic congestion in the area. Obviously a significant concern for me because, hey, I'm right there. But a significant concern for not only our subdivision, Point East, and all of the housing development in the area. The question I had was, given the nature of this development, which of course I hope never happens, but as a comment I would say there would be some increased traffic flow and increased congestion of traffic in the area. The developer mentioned probably a traffic light at the intersection where my home is. That doesn't particularly bother me, but I suspect, I don't know, but I suspect there may be some alteration to the road in that area. I would hope that if that is necessary, that is if the highway has to be expanded in that area, that all of the expansion is to the south and not to the north. I would prefer that the highway is no closer to my home than it already is. When the freeway went in, an extra lane was put in the highway, and when that happened, there was a slight intrusion, if you will, in the direction of my home. I don't know if that will be necessary, but it's a concern along with the many concerns that have been mentioned by my neighbors and other people living in the area. I'm concerned about noise pollution, I'm concerned about crime, I'm concerned about the many different things that have been mentioned. Some of these things may happen, some may not, but it's understandable that we would express those concerns to you. I thank you for hearing us. I hope that you will consider our comments and act appropriately. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony.
Hello again, Carol Cove-Oaks, and George and Randy addressed the statistical part, and I'd like to address the viability. And a couple questions that we had on board were, and I think, Jim, I wanted to ask you this too. I read, and I don't know if you had mentioned again tonight, that the site plan was a proposal, and what was proposed tonight could change. Is that correct?
This is not a question and answer period, so if you want to address your questions to the chair.
Okay. I thought I understood that it could change what the Planning Commission is looking at and what we're all looking at, that this is what proposed, but it could change. So if it did change, does that mean then it would come to the city, back to the city, if the city okayed the site plan as presented? Would it come back to our...
From here goes to council.
But once it's approved by the city, if there were any changes in the development, what's been proposed, would that have to be approved by the city at that time?
It will be.
It will not when the whole development is approved, if the city approves it, but after that, when it starts becoming developed.
If there's any changes, it would have to come back to the Planning Commission.
Okay.
Correct, John?
Yes, virtually every site would have to undergo a final site plan approval.
Okay.
And that would necessitate it coming back both to the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Okay, John, so what we're looking at right now, if the city went ahead and accepted that and approved it, if there was any change made to anything that's been presented now, after it's been approved, it would still have to be run by the city, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and the city's approval. Alrighty. Then, do we have a timeline for development like this? Because we all remember at the north end of town when the little strip malls went in, and we had Glenn's Food Market go in, and then they left and went across the street. And that big, huge square footage sat vacant for how many years? And then the other smaller sites have been rented off and on and been vacant off and on. So, site plan, what length of time are we looking at for development? 10, 15, 20 years? Because we're coming out of an economic fearsome in the state of Michigan. That was another concern. What length of time? Then a really big one, when we talked tonight, site plan presentation was great, when we talked about foot pathways from residents to restaurants and to retail. What plan actually is there? We're going to have high-end apartments, not subsidized. We're going to have senior citizens assisted and then on their own independent living. Alrighty, as people get older, they don't run too fast. Do we have any plans at those walkways for any pedestrian, no matter their age, kids, not kids, just yourselves, to get across the streets with the incoming traffic? Are we going to have any kind of a light that they can push like we do downtown for the streets to stop traffic and let them cross? Will we have any kind of stop signs so that traffic coming and going will allow this pedestrian to cross the busy streets? That's a really big concern for real people with the presentation, that they would be able to walk and live here and not really have to drive their cars. Let's see. And the proposal is, if I read it correctly, that the sites that are being developed can be either leased, retained by the developer, or sold. Is the council right now under that, with the presentation that's been made, is that your interpretation too?
I'll say yes. Anybody else?
Okay, that's what I read. Then my question is, I believe I read it in the news, I think one of the reporters reported that we have a gas station that is already the first one in the door. And my question is that sold? Is the gas station then purchasing that property? Or is that going to be a lease?
We don't know that.
We don't know that yet.
Okay, because if it is indeed sold, then again, what control do we, the people, or are we, the city council members, or whatever, what control then do we have over that when it leaves the developer's hands? I think I've got one more here too. Okay, we did the walking, no timeline. All right, and the big one that I had questioned too when we first saw the development site plans was, what about, there was nothing addressing MDOT and M55 highway traffic lights. And I believe I heard tonight in the presentation that there may be some traffic lights installed after, conferencing with MDOT. Well, what does this, in the dictionary, may means it may or may not happen. And is that going to be dependent upon the development itself as it eventually grows? Does MDOT have to come back and readdress this? Any traffic in and out for any kind of business is going to need that light there. That's a very, very busy intersection. And the last question I had was, a couple gas stations, or a few gas stations. A couple is two, few is more than two. So are we going to, will we have the viability to restrict the number of gas stations going into this development based on the site plan, or would you consider that, I guess I should say? And that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, John. Good evening. My name's Nate Swiger. I live directly across the street from this property. We've talked before. We've corresponded before, and you all know our concerns with this type of development in this area. Feels like it's coming down to the wire now, and this might be maybe our last stand. And from the beginning, and this goes back, quite a few years now with this parcel of land, even when it was still within the township. The idea of it being rezoned something other than, then it was forest recreational, and then when it was annexed, now residential. But it's almost felt like it's been the old bully on the playground type thing with your arm behind your back, crying uncle. It was, unfortunately, some people have given up now and come to the fact, well, it's inevitable. This development is inevitable. We've heard different sales pitches over meetings now for this. And I keep coming back to the idea or the thought that this whole MPUD zoning classification with the 20-acre minimum contiguous land, where it's been said that this zoning classification was not thought of or with this property in mind, but where else in the city I can only think of one parcel of land where this would be useful or could be used with that stipulation. This whole thing has almost kind of felt like and reeked of shady politics and backroom deals, and this should have been over a long time ago when the residents voted no when it was at the township level, that they didn't want to see this developed, they didn't want to see it rezoned. It's just, unfortunately, it's just another case of, does your vote really mean anything anymore? When it comes down to, it's all who you know kind of thing. We're not opposed to development. We just hope that you'll see our concerns and keep it harmonious with what's already in the area as far as the homes and stuff go. I've got 3 daughters. Their windows overlook. They can look out their windows and see this area that we're talking about. And they used to be able to look out their windows and see neighbors' homes, trees, Unfortunately, that stuff's all gone now. I don't want them to be able to come to me and say, hey, Dad, gas went up another 20 cents today, or, hey, a pack of cigarettes is now $6, Or be able to tell me what a number 5 costs, at your local run-of-the-mill fast food restaurant. I want them to grow up with people as neighbors, not pumps, not provisions, and not price tags. Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Anyone else yet this evening?
I have a question.
Yep.
Rick Liptak is here. Would he like to make some comments on the road and how it would be expanded, if so, and deceleration lanes?
Mr. Wallace, is that all right, sir?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Mr. Liptak, please.
Okay, so my name is Rick Liptak. I'm the MDOT Transportation Service Center in Traverse City. I'm now responsible for Wexford County for looking after MDOT's areas of interest, I guess. A couple things I see mentioned or heard mentioned tonight was in particular drainage. We have reviewed a draft set of calculations from the developer or his consultant. Had some comments and some questions, and so it's went back to them. They're going to do some more design work. It basically entailed making the ponds maybe a little bigger to make sure there's more than adequate retention of the water. The way that ground is shaped, the drainage falls towards the freeway, and the way state law works is that we are obligated to allow the same amount of water to run onto the freeway right away as what ran on it before it was developed. Okay, so there has to be a set of calculations that show what it was without all of the impermeable surface, and then a set of calculations with the impermeable surface. And then we do a comparison, and we have to come to grips that we both agree on those set of calculations, and then they'll have to keep the water that isn't supposed to come our way on their property for the different rain events or storm events that are identified. We have a very professional, rigorous group in Lansing that review all these hydraulic calculations for all the developments and all of the other stuff that goes on statewide next to and on our own right-of-way and everything. So they're very attuned to reviewing that stuff and following our requirements. So that's one step that's going on. The intersection where the drive comes out to the highway, obviously we have concerns about how the traffic's going to come and go out of the development. The two driveways that they have, one service drive and one in the main entrance, it is in proximity of the on and off ramps at the freeway. So we have some concerns there. What we had asked the developer to do, and this is basically a requirement because we will not issue a driveway permit for them to enter the highway until a traffic study or analysis is thoroughly done and that we agree with its results. Okay. Again, we have they've hired, from what I understand, a very reputable consultant firm who does a number of these studies all over the state to do that study for them. They're in process of that. One of the hang-ups this time of year is he needs traffic counts, and it's kind of hard to put your hoses and stuff across the road during the winter like this. So they're that slowed them down a little bit on getting the study done, from what I understand. But when they get that study done, we will determine what needs to be done to make that intersection safe. May involve a signal. I don't know. Until this analysis is done, we don't know. It may involve a center turn lane, may involve a right turn, left turn slots, things like that. I don't know yet. But that cost of that improvement will be at the cost of the developer, not the state. One other thing I should mention is that on some of these types of developments, depending on the improvements that are identified, there is a provision for them to be able to stage the improvements depending on how their development grows. And what we do is we identify the stages of the development as it grows and a cost associated with those improvements that will be needed in the future, and we make the developer keep a bond out in front, and as their development develops, then they'll have to put those improvements in place. So some developers, the other thing we don't want necessarily is for all the improvements to go in and there only be one thing there, because then let's say a traffic signal is thought to be needed when the whole development's done, but yet he's only got one little portion of it done. Well, we don't want a traffic signal sitting out there working when there's really nothing needed for it at the time. So there's a logic to staging it as well. So I don't know if there's anything else. Those are the two things I've heard.
Do you foresee people on the north side losing any more of their yards or drives?
Well, the right-of-way that's out there now, I'd have to look back at what we bought when we made those improvements there. I guess one gentleman did have a comment that the road improvements could be pushed to the south, and that's something that can be looked at. There's no doubt about that. I don't see any reason why that. The one issue you get into is how much has to be added and how big and long the tapers are to shift the traffic and things. So that's something that definitely we can look at and try to do that. So.
I got a concern about the bridge over the expressway on 55. Is there a chance that that would need to be widened?
No, looking at the length of the storage from the intersection back to the west, okay, there's probably not going to be a center turn lane necessarily there because the traffic would be going left into the development, and then the other traffic coming out of the development would probably taper in and get in well ahead of the bridge, because we're more concerned about the interaction with the ramps, I think, than the actual bridge itself. So.
Rick, I have a question again about the concern about taking any more property from the property owners. Is that 40-foot setback enough that if this development gets to a point where extra lanes are needed, is there going to be enough room there to go to the south to put those extra lanes in and not interfere with the properties to the north?
Oh, to the north. I'd have to look at what we have for right-of-way out there right now. I can't imagine that you'll never see like a 5-lane section or something out there. I mean, it'll be there is improvements that will be needed. There's no doubt about that. But the extent of them, and I guess there is you could put provisions in the thing to say if any necessary widenings are to be done, they're to be done on their side. So that's something that you can put in your provisions. Okay. So.
I would just want to make sure that we are thoughtful about that.
Agreed. And one thing I guess I would like to mention is that as MDOT, we are interested in safety of the intersection and the proper functioning of it, and we hold them, just like we do to hundreds of developers statewide. That's why we go to those specialists in Lansing that review these things statewide. So.
If there's a laning, widening or something in there, is there still room to do bicycles and things across that bridge, bike path?
The bridge itself has a full-width paved shoulder, and that's pretty much standard.
Expand the lanes there.
No, I don't. I can't see us expanding lanes across the bridge. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rick, and thanks for coming. Anyone else in the audience have anything to say? Good or bad?
For or against?
Yeah. Okay. At this stage, if staff's okay, I'll close public hearing unless you got anything else going so we can discuss this. Okay. At this time then, public hearing will be closed. Okay, just let everyone know. We now will discuss all of this. Mr. Wallace?
For your benefit, all of the department heads that have been involved in the review meetings are here to ask questions of, and of course you just heard from Rick from MDOT. So there's a lot of resources here to tap if you need detailed responses on some issues.
Can I ask that the laptop be closed so that I can see everyone that's sitting over there? Thank you. If we're done with it.
Oh, that's what was up. Okay. Okay. A lot of information. Rick brought up some good things, actually, and so did you. Spoken's on the right. Is that berm enough? Should we be looking at that? Our setbacks on the south, so we're not disrupting anyone on the north. Good idea to hit the table with that.
I think that's a good idea. I think that should be set back further.
Well, I think it addresses, if we think about that, it addresses a couple of things. The concern that the neighbors had, that there isn't enough of a setback, and then the other thing it addresses is if they do need to put more highway in there, that it can go on the south side of there.
How wide is the lane?
That's...
12 feet? Okay. So right now it's 24 plus the edges, correct? The width of the street as it is right now?
We were up there earlier, I don't have a scale with me, but there's, right at that intersection, there's more than, there's a paved shoulder plus 2 lanes, plus there's a little bit.
There is a turn lane.
There's a turn lane there down through center, probably a good 40 plus feet.
Okay. Right now.
The width of that, Rick, is what, approximately, with turning lane then of the...
Well, because there's probably 36-foot lane.
30, 40, approximately, yeah. Okay.
There's at least 66 feet right away. Okay. There's more actually there.
Right.
At least 80 feet. In your site plan, your site plan's kicking back another 80 feet? Or just from the center line or from the edge of the street?
The way the setbacks are measured under your ordinance is from the right-of-way line, so whatever the right-of-way line is. So if there's a 66 feet, you go 40 from that. If there's 100 or 80 or more there, then you go back from that right-of-way line.
Okay.
So you have all the undeveloped portion of the right-of-way plus the 40 feet.
So you're saying 66 feet plus 4?
At minimum. I think there's more right-of-way than 66 feet there right now.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, if I could just interject, if we could go to the mic when making responses back, that would be helpful. If you could just give us a second to do that. Otherwise, folks at home and here may not hear what we're saying. So, Randy or Rick or Bruce, anybody that needs to do that, just appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Are we on? Yep. Whoa. Okay.
So, we're looking at all over already 100 feet setback from the right-of-way plus the 66 feet, right?
40 feet.
But from the right-of-way. So,
which is probably
Not right, it is 40.
This is the edge of the road. This is the edge of the road. There's 100 total feet of MDOT right-of-way.
Just for the record, I'll repeat what our engineer said.
Thank you.
The indication is that there's at least 100 feet of right-of-way there right now, and so you'd have 50 on either side of the center line, and then in addition to that 50 on the south side, you would have another 40 feet of setback on our property, because the setback is always measured from the right-of-way line, not the center line.
Center line.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
John, how high are you proposing the berm out front? In your presentation, the berm along M55, how high?
Jim, but 2 to 3 feet high, and then on top of that the shrubs and then scattered trees within that area.
Another question is, the retention pond that is behind the gas station, could that be moved out in front along, as part of the buffer?
No, that's the way the lay of the land is. I mean, it flows there. I mean, Rob can answer a few questions on that, but you know, we've looked at that.
It looks like most of on the elevation sheet, it looks like everything is coming down to that corner.
Right.
The lowest point is 350 feet south of the property line. It's just by that lift station there. That's the actual lowest contour. And that's where the pipe outlet is to be. It's the overflow pipe. Is that we're working with MDOT. The people in Lansing are currently reviewing the calculations.
Okay, I may have to have you at the mic because nobody else can hear but us, and you got to make everybody happy.
So the lowest point on the property is 350 feet south of our south line of the right-of-way. So we are outletting our overflow pipe to that lowest point. We did submit calculations to the local MDOT people who reviewed it, had questions. We resubmitted it. They have sent it to Lansing, and I have not received their second review comments as of today.
But is it possible to I know that's the lowest point, but is it possible to relocate that retention basin as part of the setback area?
Well, there's, anything's possible. We can put men on moon. Yes, water can be moved, but yet on the flip side of that, that's where the corner is where the gas station and the restaurants want to be.
That's the most valuable piece right there. So we're outletting, the detention pond's located in the closest proximity to the lowest point on the property, to where we're outletting it.
Well, you kind of answered that gas station likes it there. So as far as it going to the southwest corner, didn't... Okay. And
Still the other
right.
And actually, your exposure isn't here as much as it is here. From a visibility standpoint.
So what does everybody else think about that?
I believe there should be a much bigger right-of-way, or berm, or whatever, easement to area from the highway south.
I agree. I believe the height is not adequate. I don't know. I know something was said earlier, or John told me, that John, you stated that the berm height is 3 feet for a specific reason?
Yeah, it relates to crime prevention. You want to buffer the site in terms of pavement and car headlights and all those kinds of impacts. But if you shield the entire view to too high a level, then people walking or driving by cannot see inappropriate activity that might be taking place, and it adds the potential for crime. It's known as trying to follow CPTED principles, and Todd Golnick's here, and he could address those issues as well, because he and some of his staff get involved in CPTED principles as well.
Mr. Chair? Yes, Jim. Make a comment about some of the
berming and whatever. The house to the east of our location, there's a 2-acre house there that's not part of our PUD. We have agreed with the owners there to put evergreen trees along their 2 sides to block that. We're putting them on their property and giving them the trees. You know, we're going to install that. We would be happy to do that on the north side of the road to alleviate the visibility problem there.
Okay.
You know, but the berm, you have to have some visibility there for businesses and things like that.
Right.
But we're more than happy to do something with that regard. We would install fully mature evergreen trees, you know, and give them to the homeowners there.
Perfect. Have Mr. Golnick address the berm issue, if I may, with thank you, Jim.
Good evening, members of the Commission. So, when we're talking about CPTED, CPTED is an acronym, CPTED. It's Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And the concept of CPTED is that we can design our spaces and our movements and our businesses and our hard paths and such to reduce crime by how we give sight lines, how we move people, how we can make environments hostile towards crime and hospitable towards law-abiding citizens. So one of the key principles there is clear sight lines. One of our neighborhood watch principles is curtains open, because curtains open tells people in streets and alleys that people inside could be looking out. Curtains closed gives a feeling of security to go ahead and engage in whatever clandestine activities you want to engage in. So when we're talking about berming, you could completely isolate it, but then you would be completely isolating it, which would have its own drawbacks from a crime prevention initiative. Other things that I talked to Mr. Vanderlyn about was very receptive. I do not currently have a crime prevention expert on staff yet. We will this fall. He'll be getting certified this fall on that. I have consulted several times with a private certified crime prevention specialist, and I've really started to grasp the concept. So although I'm no expert, those are the basic principles. We want trees trimmed up to certain heights. You want bushes to be in a certain area that makes it where people don't want to naturally move through. An area, too, that's designed where people don't naturally move to, draws your eye in. So if you're when you're driving and you see someone that's out of place, they're usually in a place they don't belong, your eye draws to that. You're thinking, wow, I never see anyone there. And that's why these clear sight lines are something we're talking about. Although I can't say that a berm should be 3, 4, 5, 6 feet tall, I can tell you if you kind of create a compound feeling there, I think you would lose one of those natural sight lines that you'd want. But I would not be prepared to tell you whether incremental spots would work or what would be necessarily best there without having an expert. So, which Jim has agreed to work with our expert as the different site plans progress. So, did that help? All right, I'll still be in the back if you need anything.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My only concern is as the cars pull in and they face across the street, they go right straight into their back windows or their back doors.
Yeah, but you can't build the driveway up or nothing.
Well, I'm not asking for a 10-foot berm. I'm just trying to get something that'll break as much of that light up as we can.
But they may also have some of it currently, people coming off the ramps, too. It's not that far. It's still going to hit same directions and comparable height.
But again, with regard to that, the berms that we propose are high enough to preclude traffic, well, to prevent traffic car lights from shooting north or across the berm. They're high enough with the shrub and whatnot to prevent that. But you can still see the top of the car, but you won't get the headlights, so to speak, because of that. So we've taken that into account.
Okay, that is my concern.
And that's without regard to the trees or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you again.
Takes care of that.
Okay.
Can we get a more specific number? I mean, Jim had talked 2 to 3 feet high, the berm. Is there some specific number that...
2.5.
The ones that are drawn or shown on the plans are 2.5 plus shrubbery and grass areas and whatnot, but the actual berm is set to be 2.5 under the plans that we've submitted. Remember, you also get site plan review for each individual site to revisit that situation, but what we're showing you is 2.5 feet, which is high enough to prevent headlight glare, but low enough to allow sight lines back into the premises. And then Jim's just indicated he'll deal with trees as well across the street.
Correct. Across the way. That's helpful and nice.
I do have one question. One of the people who commented had a concern about the gas station being sold and losing all control about over what the gas station is going to do. And I heard something earlier that doesn't lead me to believe that that's actually true. And so I'd like somebody to speak to that. You said that within your agreements that you have with the people that buy the property or lease the property out there, there's rules.
Yep. We have a declaration of restrictions that's signed by all occupants that come into the development, and within that is the agreement. I mean, who maintains the different roads and the paying for the light fixtures down the street and things like that. A condominium association type agreement, if declaration of restrictions on that. We are selling that site to the gas station, but it also within our restrictions is that we can't put another gas station within 500 foot of any property that we currently own. That is within our purchase agreement, will be a restriction in that purchase agreement.
And that's the thing that you can restrict, but even within the city, it's going to be city property. And so no matter who buys that property out there, they have to abide by our city ordinances and rules.
Right. Mayor, I was just going to add that, and you can confirm with your own staff, but because each site will go through a site plan review, and that review will govern the actual activities on that site and the parameters. Your council can advise you, but if someone tries to vary those without your permission, you can cite them for failing to live with the site plan.
Okay, thank you. I would like you to...
Yeah, I just wanted to address that because when the site plan's approved, there's 2 things that are going to help you here. One of them is the development agreement that the developer is going to be required. He has his own private agreements with these property owners, but you have a development agreement where he's agreed to abide by certain terms. The second thing is once the site plan is approved, that is what they call runs with the land. That doesn't change when the new owner comes in. So that's another protection. The site plan is not, he can't sell the property and then all of a sudden the site plan requirements go out the window and you have to start over again. Those are going to be conditions on the property regardless of who owns it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just like to add one thing. I would be concerned about any sales prior to the approval of the plan, only in that until we finalize the street improvements and where the right-of-way line will be, it could end up impacting our ability to have the appropriate landscape buffer.
I had another question.
He's offered, Mr. Vanderlaan has offered to plant trees along the north side. Would you allow any of those trees in the road right-of-way? Or
as long as they're put at a location that's the proper distance back from what we call the edge line, the white line. There's a clear zone that has to be maintained in there. Yeah, and that would be fine. We can work with that. But there is a safety zone that has to be maintained there for cars leaving the road. It could be.
Along the edge of the right-of-way.
Yeah.
I did have one other question too. You spoke about an emergency access point in the...
Yes, that's correct.
Where is that at?
It's right by the senior assisted living facility.
Okay.
They wanted to put another one in case it's a tie up here. Can you pull it up on the slide so they can get in? Let you go through this parking lot.
So past the detention.
Oh, okay.
It's down further.
We're pulling it up.
Okay. So they don't have to come into the main entrance, they come in the other side?
They would come in on the private development and go through the parking lot and then cut through the emergency access to the private road.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, are you actually developing the apartments, or are...
We will be maintaining ownership of the apartments. The senior living centers, not sure. We're not going to be the operators of the senior living centers, but we may be the owners of those buildings. But we don't know. I can't commit to that, but I can commit to the apartments. We are maintaining the ownership, either myself, my partner, or our partnerships. So some of the major players.
And the same with the commercial development? Are you developing that, or...
No. We're open to it, but our plan is to sell each unit,
putting in the roads and streets.
Oh yeah.
You're going to do that?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So along that same question, there was a question earlier about pedestrian safety with the traffic. And I am assuming that all of those are part of the site plans that will come back to us, and we'll talk about those safety things as we go along?
Well, Madam Mayor, I think the sketch plan itself already shows, Mr. Wall is going to address that, but it shows all of the pedestrian ways, et cetera, that have been added to the site, and we will provide in the easement documents, the real estate documents for the site when it's sold, that they'll be subject to those layouts. I think Mr. Wallace has indicated that we're not wed to the specific location right now of the pedestrian ways, but as each site develops, that will get set in stone, if you will, as part of the site plan. But we're committing to do it now, and we're committing to make clear that in any sales and whatnot, that would be covered. I suspect your development agreement will also make sure we do that. But
okay, I just wanted clarification for the person that was concerned about it. Thank you.
So as part of the development agreement, will it be in there that if any of these people want trees planted along in specific locations, that they will do it then?
We can provide for the mechanism through the development agreement with the city. You can enforce it through that development agreement, but we're committing to do it. The mechanism of when, specific detail of it, etc., we'd have to work through the development agreement to provide for that.
And since you're there yet, please.
Okay.
So there will be crosswalks and stuff internally, and will that be done by stop signs, no traffic lights, I would imagine?
We certainly don't want traffic lights within the system.
Well, I'm just...
But we'll work with John Wallace particularly with regard to the design of how those pedestrian ways will intersect with our vehicular traffic, because we want it to be safe. And okay. John will probably dictate to us exactly how it ends up being done. But
yeah, two things. We have a public road system and a private road system, and certainly the city controls what will become the dedicated public, street system. I think MDOT will have something to say about the future of the entry intersection and street, and whether they would require crosswalks and how that would all be handled. As it moves internal to the development, I think it would be more a question of the city's engineer reviewing the need for those improvements, and or if he chose to seek traffic engineering advice, could determine at what time such crosswalks might be needed. I don't think we've drilled down that far into the weeds, pending knowing what the final arrangement of buildings and what the final parking count and business use will be at this point in time. Right. But certainly we have the flexibility to do whatever we need for appropriate pedestrian crosswalks as we look and see the project unfold in the future.
John, what properties do you own along 55 there, where the private road goes up? There's 4 residential houses there.
What where the private drive goes up, that house right there, and where Carol Lane currently is, this right through here, we own that property, and there is an easement for that Carol Lane to go up. So, because there is still some houses up in this area here, on Cassidy Drive, I guess it's called, there's a mobile home or a couple mobile homes up there. We will, that'll stay, but we own that, and we own these lots right here.
The Cassidy Drive stays, that's going to be used by...
Yeah, oh yes, that's not our property, that's not our...
So there's 2 houses west of the private road that you don't own that property?
Yeah, west and south. Okay. South of our property. Or no, excuse me, getting off.
As a safety concern, I wonder what the speed limit will be within the development.
That'll probably be...
I think that would be a major...
Yes, it'd be like in the city, 25 mile an hour.
I would...
Well, the city will control the public street. The north-south street is public, and then that east-west court will be public.
Right.
And those are city streets, so your people will decide what that's going to be. We can't control that anyway. And then on the private streets, we can certainly post signs, 15 miles an hour or 25, whatever we want to post. But the public street, 2 of them, will be your responsibility, and you will set the speed limits on those.
Thank you.
Mr. Dolnick, I have a question for you. One of the suggestions was to have the lights and businesses that aren't open at between 11 and 7 a.m. to be turned off. Does that cause any safety problems or crime problems or anything at that point? Okay. I like the idea.
So your question about the lighting and how that fits into a crime prevention design. Lighting is a huge strategic component of crime prevention through environmental design. It doesn't necessarily require the ambient light of large signs or anything like that, but there would be an expectation that there would be some sort of lighting to deter criminal activity or allow you to detect criminal activity. And again, I'm really not the designer of that or the person who could really say how that light should focus, but it definitely is a critical element of it. So if there was going to be certain restrictions on the sign lighting, we'd be looking for something to work with and to see where there would be security lighting of some sort. But yeah, lighting would be part of it.
And in that regard, again, your individual site plan reviews will pick up the lighting on each site, and I guess you can have that discussion with the chief and others about each individual site. Certainly today we would be opposed to having that blanket requirement because we just don't know for sure what's going to go there and what the demand will be. Right. But you will get a chance to review that on an individual basis.
Okay. I was thinking more like my neighborhood, the street lights. I hope they go off on purpose because they do.
Somebody will be
they go off
check
and on.
that.
I was thinking more of that. The signs for the businesses, most of the businesses you'll find around town, they turn off the lights when they close. So I don't think that's going to be a problem. But maybe the street lights.
Well, and again, I think that's going to be Bruce's call, because the city definitely has an ordinance how street lighting is supposed to be, and we definitely look at the strategic placement of it, but intersections is really the key there.
Right.
But I would say that it would be far removed from me to really comment further on any of that as far as any of this proposal goes.
Jim might be able to address that, Jim Morgan, a little bit on the lighting and stuff like that.
You have to come up.
But again, I think we're getting the cart before the horse here a little, in all honesty, on this lighting. Yes, Marcus?
Just for the benefit of the Planning Commission, as Chief Golnick had mentioned, the city does have an ordinance with respect to street lighting where basically the policy advises that it's supposed to be at our intersections. We have to keep in mind that this is, again, an MPUD program or project in which we all, the Planning Commission and the City Council, would ultimately have the say as to where the lighting should go. And just as we discussed with the developers, the staff team, we made a comment about how the lighting certainly is not going to be anywhere near as frequent as you might find in a traditional downtown setting like you have in downtown Cadillac, nor would it necessarily be as far apart as you might find in a more rural setting where you have an intersection, once every few blocks or a few miles. You're going to need to have it done in a manner that is going to keep it safe for both pedestrians and vehicles alike, and certainly also done in a manner in which it's going to do everything possible to try to maintain that dark sky presence. So.
Okay. But it was brought up by people, and I'd like to, at least if we could, answer what we can.
Right. Certainly.
We'll know that we're thinking ahead of this. We're not waiting until we're going to do it.
And even though it's slightly out of order here, since there was a concern brought up about traffic safety, just a quick reminder, as John pointed out, you have a public street system and a private street system. Obviously the public street system would be treated like any other street, and you'd have, police enforcement and such of that as necessary and would be needed. In these private systems like this that are basically open to the general public, there is also, the statutes also allow the police to enforce certain driving and traffic regulations within a private street system. And a great example, if you just think of Country Acres, Country Acres is a private development that we're often called because the law allows them to establish a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit enforceable by the police, and we're often called because the people exceed that and it's upsetting to them. And so just to give you that little bit of knowledge there, that there is control within those if should that one wild kid decides to get his new Mustang, right? Pretty good.
Thank you.
Did we ever get an idea about what we'd like for that northern buffer right along the highway, the width of it? Could we decide on a width that we wanted, or are we sticking with the 40 feet that they're recommending?
I'd like to go more than 40.
Could I address that a minute?
Yep.
I think probably a good solution, and I don't know if Rick is still here.
He is.
But if the full build-out, if what they might require in terms of laneage upon full build-out could be determined, and they could determine what the additional right-of-way would be, that it be 40 feet from that future right-of-way if it changes. If it doesn't, it would be just as it is today, 40 feet from the current right-of-way. That way there's no chance that you end up with less than the 40 feet. And I think in 40 feet, you can do a very good job if you design appropriately of blocking errant light and buffering the pumps and buffering the asphalt pavement on the property. But that would be my recommendation.
So when that study would be concluded, then we could look at that, because then Rick will have that information. So at least it's still open, but not...
It's all contingent on that report.
Right.
But we've got 3 things that we could do tonight, and we could approve it with that condition in there. And maybe you could tell us what that would...
Yeah, that would be, you could approve it with the condition that, you know, first of all, I do want to, I listen to all the public comments, I do want to circle back to reminding us where we are in the process, and this is just the sketch plan, and some of this will be addressed further on the final...
I think we're a little further ahead, but...
Well, now, technically no, and I caution that because one of the members said this was their last stand, and it's not. So with that in mind, one of the conditions could be that just as Mr. Wallace mentioned, that you could figure out what the final right-of-way is, condition and determination upon the final right-of-way, then there would be a 40-foot buffer, and that would protect you with that. And I think by the time, I'm assuming, but obviously before the final site plan would be approved, that we would know what that line is, and that would be a condition of the final site plan. But I think certainly investigating that and making sure it will be a proper condition for this sketch plan approval.
Add it into it. It's got to be more than 40 feet. It ought to be more than 40 feet.
Rick, just a weird question. You think the results of this during more of a winter will be accurate enough numbers? Obviously, we have a lot of snowbirds in this area to try and get ample traffic.
We actually design for average daily traffic. We do not design for peaks. So it is more of a fall spring type number is what we usually design for. So that's, yeah.
Thank you.
It doesn't have that. You can't control the landscape.
John, if I might, I could suggest my running notes on conditions, if that would help the commission.
Yes, please.
Well, what the board could do is make a motion or you could have a motion to approve with the following: approve the MPUD rezoning and the sketch plan with the following conditions, and have John list those.
My running notes would be final MDOT approval of both the street design and the drainage calculations, which they mentioned they're still working on completing. That the sidewalk/trail along M55 be appropriately included in the development agreement. That the extension of Terry D. Boulevard through the development agreement be provided for to extend to the south property line. That the city reserves the right until final site plan to make a final determination of parking adequacy. That be a condition. That the development agreement be successfully agreed to between the city and the developer, and all future street signals or other street improvements at the entry be borne by the developer and not the city in terms of those future needed improvements. I think with all of that, and then also with respect to my first point I mentioned, the approval of streets by MDOT, also that they project the future right-of-way needs based on their final calculations and adjust the 40 feet per a future right-of-way if it's going to change, or if it's not going to change, it would be 40 feet from the existing right-of-way.
Okay.
That seems like it would cover everything.
John, would that sidewalk be along M55 be located in the road right-of-way or within
That's correct.
feet?
It would be within the road right-of-way. So when they're counting the lanes, there would have to be room left for that, you know, that walkway.
I'd still like to see that buffer wider than the 40 feet up on the north end of the property.
I agree.
There's 70 feet on a lot of other places there, and I don't know why this isn't bigger. I know they want to have access for seeing the businesses there, but I'm still concerned that there's not enough buffer for the neighbors. So I'd like to see it larger.
I agree. We can put this on a condition then.
Well, that's why I'm asking you guys if you think that's something you want to do. I'd like to see it.
What's your possible number?
At least 70 like the rest of those along behind the other properties.
There's 100 around this spot. On the east side, there's 100 feet.
The other northern properties right around those, the buffer right around those other properties are 70 feet, I believe, that to the little L shape coming off 55 back.
Yeah, these buffers we discussed during the ordinance preparation. It was different site parameters. It was wider on the one side because it was direct adjacency right to the property line of the residential development, where it had an added road width in the case of the other setbacks. So it was different site conditions as to why they were set at a different width.
So do we want to do a motion?
Well,
I think we should have some more discussion about
setback thing is the problem. So I don't know if you're almost doubling it down, but that's why we're talking about it.
I just think the more we protect neighbors across the street, the less problem we're going to have with trying to get this to get going. So 70 foot.
I think when you think about a buffer, from a sound perspective, if you made it 10 or 15 feet wider, it would almost be insignificant. No one could tell the difference of the noise. If you're mostly trying to, number one, soften the view of the parking lots, and you're trying to block visuals in this buffer as well as make it attractive. In that respect, the 40 feet does the job. If you had wider buffers, you might do it if you were going to intensify the landscape screening, but as we've talked about, that becomes counterproductive from a safety perspective. So that's why it was originally proposed at 40, because it felt like aesthetically it addressed the concerns, and from blocking the light it addressed the concerns, and we realized that we couldn't fully adequately deal with sound issues. Plus, there's an amazing amount of sound right there on the roadway itself, much more than you would have with traffic moving at very slow speeds on the development site.
And I'd also point out, if I may, you know, a lot of effort has been put into the calculations and whatnot that relate to that detention pond where it's currently located, and we've gone through many iterations with MDOT and whatnot, and we think we've got a pretty good project there that they will approve. If we change any of that, it's going to have a significant effect on us. And in addition, again, we would emphasize that we're willing to plant trees across the street, which should, I think, mitigate any of this discussion about
that helps offset stuff. for the neighbors, if they're willing to do that. You know, I mean, right, I look at their plan, and it's this detention pond, it's right there.
You know, I still don't think that's enough.
Well, okay.
60 would be minimum, I think.
One of the things you could do is, in the condition I mentioned about a successful development agreement between the developer and the city, is that that provision to work with the homeowners on that one side includes some provisions for them, as they've offered, to supplement some landscape materials to improve the buffer where it does actually more good, which would be on their property in terms of blocking the, because it would not only block what's on the development, but it would also block the traffic on M55, so that would probably be the best outcome that you would want to achieve.
Great. This is people turning around their lights, aren't you?
You've got power lines there, you can't put trees there.
Yeah, but he said that the burn that they proposed wasn't.
Yeah. I think it's
Power lines are in the dip part?
Individually on each one, but 2.5 feet doesn't, like truck headlights are up about 3.5.
We can deal with that on each one when we get to that point.
I guess we'll have to look at that. But just so that we understand there'll be a berm there.
Yeah.
They're saying that there are power lines on the other side of the road, which would prohibit some tree planting over there. On the north side of the road, behind their houses, there's a power line that goes through.
But you can still put in trees that isn't what they do.
Shall we ask Rick about that?
Yeah, you can put up a tree with shrub that goes this way versus
up. Doesn't go up.
Rick, how are you?
I don't know if he... door, but not see here.
Glad you came. The question was raised on the north side. There's power lines.
Yes.
Would that inhibit or not allow us to put something in there to
if it's in MDOT's right of way and the utility company is there, they do come to us and trim and cut trees, you know, back because of their thing. But I have seen them before. If there's a maintenance agreement of a tree to a certain height, let's say conifers, where somebody has to keep them trimmed in. If they don't, then they take them out. So there is something possibly there that could be done with the power company or whoever there with an agreement to allow trees to a certain height.
And Rick, you could specify trees that purposely didn't grow to the height that interferes.
Yeah, that sounds good in theory, but you know, in 50 years, who knows what that tree's going to look like?
Well, I mean, shrubs too. You can get arborvitae that are going
I think
to 10
we've had over the years when we built the freeway, we had a number of people concerned about the turning off the ramp there, and I've met with a few of those landowners. I don't know if they're still there or not, but their houses kind of sit down a little bit, and there's an embankment there, and so the trees actually have to get fairly good size in order to do anything, and that's something that a few of those homes will be faced with, and the tree that he puts there will have to be a fairly good size. But the power lines there again are up quite high, so that's something that could be, I think, worked out with the power company in that area. So,
thank you again, Rick.
Thank you.
So, okay, now again, this sketch plan where I think we're getting
Ahead of ourselves.
little ahead of some of this, yeah, but because everything will come back.
That's correct.
Okay? And part of me thinks that at least until the study from MDOT comes back, you do have 40, but it could possibly increase, in which case it may disrupt this plan, but if that's how the numbers come back.
I think it's already figured in the setback for the extra lane coming off. If you're heading east, you're going to be pulling off for the road to get into the entrance. That's already figured in, isn't it, Rick? If you're heading east and you want to turn right into the complex, there's already a right-of-way figured to turn in there already, right?
Into the subdivision to the north, there's a center turn lane, so the lanes come along off the freeway. There's actually a turn slot, I believe, at the ramps, and then it continues there, and then there's that, there's a center turn lane, and then as it goes past the subdivision, then it starts to taper back in. So there's already...
So you wouldn't be figuring on any more property?
I could see possibly another, the right turn slot going into that, but I don't see a significantly huge increase to the roadway. That's just my speculation.
I don't think that 40 feet's going to change.
Probably not.
And that would include if we added say a 8 or 10 foot trail system through there in the future?
Typically, when we put a trail in, we want the trail right out at the right-of-way line, or you can't build them next to the road. You want a 12, 15 foot. You want as big a buffer as you can.
So even if you add whatever you're going to add, you don't think you would need to increase the right-of-way even with a trail?
Not necessarily. I don't know. I have to look at the cross-section, but a lot of times, and I've seen this in other developments where they actually, that 40-foot buffer that you're talking about, that's where they actually put the trail, because that's part of the condition to the developer is to put in and maintain that trail along the front. So I've seen that happen in some other areas. So
yeah, that could work. Then it works against some of the people that are wanting a more definitive screen and using more of that space.
The screen, the one thing I guess I would comment is the screen, and I know and this 40-foot, 80-foot, whatever buffer there, I guess if there was a way to put trees on the north side of the road to buffer those people directly, I think that would have more of an impact than probably the wider buffer on the other side of the road, which is probably just going to be grass most of the thing. So I would look at that more to think that is something that would be much more conducive to protecting their houses from all of the traffic, not just the subdivision, but the highway traffic as well.
I would agree with you on that.
So,
and quite frankly, I don't have a problem with seeing the trail. We would just have to, if we want to make better use of that space, we would have to then have easements that trail could run, in that space as well.
The main thing from MDOT's standpoint, when we get in these discussions about trails, we don't really push trails unless they're actually going somewhere. We don't want a trail that's just in the front of somebody's property and it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so even sidewalks and everything, you can put a sidewalk out the highway, but if it doesn't go anywhere, it really isn't going to do a whole heck of a lot. So as far as MDOT's concerned, it has to be connected to something. That's the only way we would push it. So.
And we discussed that, and that's why we weren't requiring it from the outset, but we're going to wait till an appropriate time when we had it in a position to connect to a safe system, whenever that happened.
Do we approve the zoning change and table the...
We can do it with conditions. We can approve this with the conditions that we want.
Right. With all the conditions John read.
Yeah. It's still a sketch plan. Everything's going to come back to us for the specific plan anyway.
Yeah. So if we were to approve the sketch plan with the conditions that John has, then we still can work on all of the things that we're concerned about.
I think we ought to do it. Okay. All right.
Now, will that 40-foot will still be open to change if you approve that?
Yes, because John put it in there until the...
Well, I think you can word it both ways.
Depending on if the highway decides they need more room.
Right.
I would suggest to do it both ways. If upon further review with Rick, we determine there's no change needed to the right-of-way, that we go with it to 40 feet from where the current right-of-way line is. If upon further evaluation with Rick, we decide that they need another 3 feet or 5 feet or whatever it is, then we start the 40 feet from there.
Right.
And so if it doesn't happen, then we don't do it. But if we word it either way, we're good to go. And as soon as that, at the earliest moment we can make that determination, we're free to move without having to come back for further meetings. And then you get the protection that you'll get a minimum, of that 40 feet.
At least.
Minimum, but you can go more.
Yep.
It'll still be open for more.
It'll be open. Yep.
Not including the highway department.
Well, that's kind
right. You'll have 40 feet on private property of buffer area. That's not counting any of the grass that's in the right of way before you get to the buffer. there will be 40 feet on private property that's in a landscape mode with a berm and shrubs and trees and so forth.
But I don't think DOT's going to want more property. So I want.
Well, then we would be good to go.
Well,
we'd be good to go.
No, because we're looking at a bigger buffer, 60 feet, 70 feet.
I guess you'd need to determine why that might be necessary. What you would be trying to achieve with it.
Will appease the property owners across the street.
But I think if you move that little, I agree. You're just going to Ann.
I would just like to interject one thing on the buffer issue is that, you know, that's a requirement. That was a decision made at the time the ordinance was passed that went through Planning Commission and City Council approval, and there was lots of discussion, I understand, about what that proper zone is. So I just want to point that out, that whether 40 feet is appropriate is something that was discussed during the zoning ordinance approval process.
Thank you.
So we already determined it.
I think by working with them across the way with the tree thing, that's more beneficial instead of, okay, I got more green grass. I don't know, but...
Okay,
I don't think it's right.
Yes, I think we're ready. Who wants to speak?
Why are you looking at me?
Well, is your next to John.
Okay. I'll make a motion.
Okay.
To pass the sketch plan as it is with conditions that John has.
As staff, okay.
The staff, I'm sorry. That's my motion.
You're missing a part.
I'm sorry?
Ann will guide you.
Would you mind if I made some friendly suggestions to the... just to make sure we're in conformance with what the ordinance requires of you at this point, my recommendation would be that the Planning Commission recommends approval of the application, which includes both the rezoning request to MPUD and the sketch plan approval for the application submitted by Terry D. LLC, with the following conditions, and then name those.
Pointed out.
So I just want to make sure you have both the components of the MPUD rezoning and sketch plan approval as part of your motion.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if you want me to walk through those again, I could.
Yeah, why don't you do that,
You
Joe?
okay with all his points?
Yeah, I'd like you to walk back through if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, number one was final MDOT approval of the streets, which primarily would involve the M55 and the entryway, and also their final review and acceptance of the drainage calculations and design. That the future potential to be borne by the developer be included in the development agreement for the sidewalk/trail on M55, not to be installed initially, but set for the future when an appropriate safe connection could be made. That in the development agreement that the developer agree in the future, if needed with future developments, that they are willing to extend the Terry D. Boulevard right away to the south property line. That the city retains right upon final land uses to make a final parking space determination count for the various uses, recognizing now that at least generically we think they're very close to the right number. That there would be a successful development agreement agreed to between the developer and the city, and I think, as Rick may have alluded to, future either street improvements or signal improvements be borne by the developer and not the city or the state. And the only final one that you can consider is whether you want to require also that the agreement, the development agreement, include provisions that the developer, as they suggested, they would like to help, that there be inclusions of the additional landscaping on the private property, and if you want to do that, that would be the final piece.
To the north and...
Right.
Okay.
what he said.
Okay.
What about setback?
The setbacks are as they are currently at the 40, with the aid of buffers, possibly, or vegetation or trees across the way instead. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I support the motion.
Have a second? So I have motion made by Mr. Fent, seconded Ms. Filkins.
Schichtel.
Yes. Yes.
Fent.
Yes.
Smith.
No.
Filkins.
Yes.
Peterson. Van Lente. Champlin.
No.
Gregg.
Yes.
Putvin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Recommendation to City Council.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where am I? Here. Tabled items. There being no tabled items at this time. Any board member comments? Comments?
Is it proper to make a comment about what we just done?
Yes.
Sure.
I think it's a good thing. I believe Cadillac was never destined to be a country town. I mean, we have the merging of three major highways here. We're an industrial center, educational center with a technical Baker College mill complex.
True.
Shopping center for a large geographical area, and I think it'll just enhance our importance in northern Michigan, what was just done. And I fully support it.
It's all good and on the positive side. Thank you, Joe.
And I would like to add to that, you know, we made a promise to the property owners early on, and that we promised that each step of the way that we were going to be here and we were going to have discussions about this development and what it means for our community. And I think that everybody that's sitting up here, no matter how they voted, is very committed to that promise.
Yes.
And we didn't see any raise, nothing to nothing. So we didn't get paid off up here. Okay, shut up. Any other board member comments? Communications, there was a letter in our packet or stuff here from Kenneth Takema also regarding the project. Staff, do you need to add to that?
No, that's the only communication that we received.
And at this time, I'm happy to open it up to public comments. Just try and keep them short if you would like to say anything, I guess. Now, everybody's good? Okay.
Hello, Madam Mayor, members of the Commission. Don Koschmeider, Cadillac, Michigan. I was supposed to talk to you guys, Planning Commission, a couple weeks ago. I was out of town. I'd like to apologize for that. I know we're talking about planning, rezoning, a development here. I'm here to also talk about maybe working with the Planning Commission about zoning medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Cadillac someday. Hoping to work with you guys. A lot of other cities across Michigan have done this locally. Safe access, safe transfer points for people that need their medicine. So hoping that we can work with you guys here in the future. Sorry about missing the meeting last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any other public comment this evening? Okay. There being no other business and whatnot, I would like to thank everyone for coming and giving us your input. Appreciate it very much, and we're gone.